Join us at Women of Courage and celebrate the achievements of women. The Women of Courage show is being broadcast by the Women and Children's Restoration Ministries to help you problem solve, to help you dream again, to help you believe that anything is possible. We want you to believe that you do not have to marry the first man you meet just to get someone to take care of you. You do not have to live a life of drudgery. You can educate yourself. All you have to do is learn to read competently. We want you to take a chance on yourself. Stop believing all the soothsayers around you that have never left a state in their lives. People who do not have courage to fly. People who only think of lying, cheating, and stealing. You can live an exciting life. All you have to do is believe that you can make your dreams come true. You do not have to go to bed with someone you despise day in and day out. You have the right to marry someone that you can talk to someone that believes in you and has faith in you as a human being. In other words, you do not have to settle for just anyone. But what you must do is strive toward your goal. You must be goal oriented. You must organize yourself. You must be clear about what you want in life and why you want such a life. All of us are made up of dreams. As our dreams unfold in our lives, our spirit soars. Realizing our dreams becomes a problem because oftentimes we are beaten down by our friends and family. We are beaten down at school by people laughing at us because of our shoe size, our ear size, our breast size, the clothes we wear, etc. We are beaten down by people saying nothing will come of our lives. We are beaten down when our mothers and grandmothers constantly say that we're going to be just like our father, an inmate in prison. Many of us are also discouraged when our mothers are inattentive. She is wrapped up in her new boyfriend. But life anew is possible. It is my job to encourage you to go as far as you can dream and as far as your dreams can take you. It is my job to get you to believe in life again. I am sick and tired of people failing at life just because they are around negative speaking and negative acting people. Do not let the failure of other people make you lose confidence in yourself. Yes, you may be surrounded by poverty, but you must look for a way out. The book, If You Believe in God, You Do Not Belong in Prison, will help you. What you must do above all else is learn to read competently. You must read, read, and read. Anyone who laughs at you for reading, you need to leave that person alone. I do not care if it's your mother. Anyone who discourages you, you are to stop all association. Man is not different than plants. We need encouragement to grow as plants need water to thrive. You are to leave foolish, stupid people alone. Their ignorance will weigh you down or even get you killed. Sit down and think how you can avoid these people, especially if they're in your family. If you are overwhelmed with the tiring feeling that feels as if you're carrying a bag of stone around every morning when you get out of bed and think how you'll have to spend another living life you're not passionate about, the books I suggest are the perfect solution for your unique needs. Not only will we help you realize why these feelings overwhelm you and what you can do to change it, but they will also teach you how to live a life of strength, courage, fearlessness in order to realize all of your dreams. If you are lacking the attitude and psychology, proper resource or vision to make your dreams a reality, combined with dissatisfaction with the execution of your plans, but you remain firmly dedicated to making your ambition a reality and creating the life you deserve, you will certainly derive the most benefit from professional, incredible content within these books contents that will assist you in achieving the results that you are after. You are never to give up on yourself. Are you ready to leave your future to chance? Of course not. Take your life in your hand and learn all the necessary tools, mindset, strategies used by the men and women of courage used in order to live the life of their dream. Change your life with our book starting today. We're going to thoroughly discuss the sex trade taking place in our community and the country. For us, this is high priority. We cannot let the deviant men and women in our communities win just because we fail to band together and mount a defense. Before I begin, I want to say please do not ignore any of the information we discuss. If you missed something, email us at murdervoices@gmail.com and we will send you our links to our broadcast. This is life saving information. Whether you believe it or not, once your child is taken for the sex trade, there is nothing you can do and no one you can go to. There are nonprofit organizations that give lectures to prevent this practice and try to rescue people, but there are no state agencies that send investigators out to look for kidnapped victims of the sex trade. You are on your own. Think of how you would feel if a kidnapping takes place in your family, if your daughter or favorite niece is taken and sold into sex slavery. This is why we're going to thoroughly cover the subject of sex trafficking, hoping you will join us on Saturday in fighting this horrible, horrible crime. We must do more than just talk. Women have a tendency to discuss subjects like sex, sex trafficking, rape as if it happens to someone else. The subject is unpleasant, so many women choose to ignore it. This is a mistake. Women exercise the same behavior when it comes to rape. We do not want to discuss the subject. We do not want to prepare for the event. How can you protect your child if you refuse to talk to them about rape? You must find courage somewhere and be a responsible parent and discuss the unpleasant things in life. These discussions with your children can help them protect themselves. You would be telling them to look for bad people. The more you talk about rape, the better your daughter will be prepared to deal with the rapist. There are characteristics of a rapist, just like there are characteristics of a pimp. Why should you go to church begging God to help you when a pimp turns your daughter into a prostitute, when all you had to do was talk to your daughter over and over and over again about how men use women to make money off their bodies? It is foolish to think it will not happen to you. Start shaping your child's mind now instead of waiting until she is in a caustic relationship that might cost her her life to start talking to her. Stop having children if you're not willing to fight for them. Fighting for your child means educating yourself on how to train your children and how to talk to them. There is lots of information in books that can help you. And there are also lots of organizations with information. All you have to do is reach out. Stop walking around with your head in the sand, pretending all is well when the ground is crumbling under your feet. Granted, no one is perfect, but when it comes to your children, you must fight for them before someone takes their body and minds. Sex traffickers are banking on our ignorance and lack of activity. Again, I say, no one is perfect, but when it comes to your children, you must fight for them before someone else takes their body and mind. Some sex traffickers are banking on our ignorance and lack of activity. There is something else women love to do, and that is to blame the victim. He asked for it. She asked for it. Look at the dress she was wearing. In other words, the woman was raped because the man cannot be expected to have self-control when a woman dresses sexy. Men are so overcome with the thought of sex that they have to rape someone. This is a sign of self-hatred and jealousy in women. So far, we have discussed a man who failed at becoming a rapper, who then decided to become a pimp to support himself. The second story we discussed was a man who decided to be a pimp also to support himself. He tried soldiering, then went back to pimping. Now we're going to discuss a female, actually two females, who decided to try their hand at pimping. They found a 17-year-old girl to live off of. November the 29th, 2018, the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department announced the arrest of Sheila Hill, age 44, and Stephanie Hill, age 40. The two women, who are relatives, are accused of sex trafficking. Sheriff's Department was investigating an online posting advertising an underage girl for prostitution. The ad led the detectives to believe the 17-year-old was being trafficked out of the Best Ontario Inn located on 1045 West Mission Boulevard in Ontario, California. And through further probing, the investigators tracked the victim to an apartment complex in Highland, California. Detectives subsequently determined that Stephanie and Sheila had been involved in supporting, encouraging, and profiting from the prostitution of this victim. The girl has since been turned over to the Children and Family Services. The two Hills were being held on a $150,000 bail each on suspicion of pimping, pandering, and human trafficking of a minor. Inmate, inmate records show that both women were scheduled to appear in court on December the 3rd. The San Bernardino County Human Trafficking Task Force can be reached at 909 387 8400. Through additional investigating and interviews, the task force members were able to determine that both suspects had allegedly been involved in supporting, encouraging, and profiting from the prostitution of this victim. Apparently, the two women did not see what they were doing was a crime. They were just providing sex for men. It was not their body that they were selling. Remember, sex trafficking is human trafficking for the purpose of sexual exploitation, including sexual slavery. Sex trafficking has two aspects of supply and demand. The sex exploitation is based on the interaction between the trafficker selling the victim to the customer to perform sexual services. Sex trafficking crimes are defined in three ways: acquisition, movement, and exploitation, and includes child sex tourism, domestic minor sex trafficking, or commercial sex exploitation of children, and prostitution. Sex trafficking is one of the biggest criminal businesses and the fastest growing criminal industry in the world. When we discuss the Thai connection in America, you'll see what I'm saying. The Thai connection involved over 10 states and 38 people. According to the International Labor Organization, there are 20 million people subjected to forced labor, and 22%, which is approximately 4.5 million, who are victims of forced sexual exploitation. However, due to the covetousness and of sex trafficking, obtaining actual reliable statistics is difficult for the researchers. The global commercial profit for sexual slavery are estimated to be in the hundred thousands of billion dollars. Let me say that again, $99 billion according to this source. In 2005, the figure was given as 9 billion for the total human trafficking industry. They say over half of the women in many European countries have been trafficked at least once or twice in their life. Most victims find themselves in coercive or abusive situations from which escape is both difficult and dangerous. Locations where this practice occurs spans the globe and reflects an intricate web between nations, making it very difficult to consult viable solutions to this human rights problem. Now we are going to discuss Mr. Joseph McGough and Mr. Robert Stansfield, who tried their hand at sex trafficking in Michigan. To date, there has been 24 arrests made in Michigan under the new sex trafficking law. There has been 21 convictions. 3 cases are pending. One of the pending cases is for Mr. Robert Stanfield. Mr. McGough has already been convicted. Mr. Stanfield's trial is scheduled for February 2019. In this situation, I think Mr. Stanfield is a victim of his own stupidity. It was Mr. McGough who was the principal actor. Mr. Stanfield and his friend, Mr. McGough, are probably now wishing they had found real jobs and left pimping alone. Both men were arrested September 2017 and charged with sex trafficking December 2017. The victim, who was a minor at the time, alleged that Mr. Joseph McGough was trafficking her out of motels and hotels in Macomb and Oakland County between April 2017 to September 2017. The alleged victim said she and her friend were recruited and encouraged to engage in commercial sex by Joseph McGough and his friend Robert Stanfield. Joseph McGough took the victims from her hometown to the metropolitan Detroit area where they used hotels for her to engage in commercial sex. Mr. McGough showed his victim how to use Backpage and instructed her to post in massage sections using a pseudonym. Mr. McGough took all of the alleged victim's earnings from her performing commercial sex. His victim alleged that she had to go on multiple dates every day. Joseph McGough's friend, Robert Stanfield, allegedly took over Joseph McGough's role in the operation during periods of time when Mr. McGough was out of town partying. The Warren Police Department and the FBI-led task force investigated the woman's claims. The FBI ended up arresting both Joseph McGough and his friend Mr. Stanfield. Joseph McGough went on trial first. October 2018, Joseph McGough, age 24, of Portland, Huron, pleaded guilty to 1 count of human trafficking, forced labor resulting in commercial sex, for his involvement in the sex trafficking of a minor. November the 2nd, 2018, Joseph McGough was sentenced to 47 months to 15 years in a federal prison for his involvement in the human trafficking of a minor female. He should serve every year of this sentence in prison. At the time of his sentencing, he had been in jail for 343 days. We guess he did not have money to post bail, and apparently he did not have any relatives that cared enough to bond him out of jail. So once Joseph McGough was arrested, he has not been out of custody. So trafficking a minor was only a fix for his problem of not having any money. If you have time, there are about 3 articles I would like for you to go on the internet and read. The articles are Sex Trafficking Victims Are Forced to Relive Their Trauma in Order to Clear Their Record. 7 Des Moines defendants plead guilty to charges of sex trafficking. Woman kidnapped in late 1980s finally rescued in Bolivia. I believe after reading these articles, you will better understand why we are spending so much time on the subject of sex trafficking. I am going to pause for a second to take a short break while you listen to information regarding willpower and encouragement. It is all a matter of learning new behaviors. And please remember, It is easier to build strong minds than to repair injured people. What I said is a modification of a quote by Frederick Douglass. He said, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." Now for my break.
Oftentimes, fear is defined as fantasized experiences appearing real. We all fear something. It could be doing what's never been done, or being scared for no just cause. These fears hold us down and create a fantasized, albeit unreal, experience. If you must move ahead in life, you must stand up to your fear. If you must be successful, you must pull through the unreal experiences that fear has created in you. And trust me, you need a good dose of courage to do exactly that. With courage, there's no stopping you. How can you summon the courage to face your fears? As a woman, you're amazing and you have great capabilities. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. How then can you maximize these great capabilities? As you'll find out in the series Women of Courage, the women we wrote about succeeded against all odds simply by standing up for themselves. Just like them, you can make your life count too.
You can find the series Women of Courage at www.touchedbythelight.us.
Every year, thousands of books are written on how to achieve our dreams, how to live a happier life, or make a lot of money. Yet, the number of people living unhappy lives keeps going up. People living a life of uncertainty, a life of despair. What could be the problem? Were the books lying about these promises, or were people not practicing what they read? You see, the truth is that most times we know exactly what we want out of life, and we often know how to get there. So, what is the missing link? It's the courage to take that first step, to go from where we are right now to the life of freedom and fulfillment we so much desire. We must first leave our comfort zone, and it takes courage to make that move. And that is exactly where all those books failed. They tell you what you should do, but can't get you to take that first step. A wise man once said, "Without courage, you can't leave your comfort zone. If you don't leave your comfort zone, you can't grow. If you can't grow, you can't be your best. And if you can't be your best, you can't be happy."
You can find the series Women of Courage at www.touchedbythelight.us.
Are you sick and tired of being you? Do you want another life, a second chance? Then it's time to change. It's time for you to find out who you are. It's time for you to stand up for yourself. It's time for you to think for yourself. It's time to rid your mind of poisonous beliefs like women should only be seen and not heard. It's time for you to learn how other women accomplished their goals. For more information regarding Women of Courage and to be among the countless women learning to manage the challenges, limitations, and rejections of life, go to https://touchedbythelight.us.
We live in a society that has created an impression that a woman is limited in what she can do. The society lets you see yourself as a weaker human who should not aspire to greater things. Most of us grew up with that mentality and thus turned out to be unambitious. Good news is there are lots of women out there just like you who have turned their lives around dramatically. There's one underlying factor common to all these women: courage. They were courageous in the face of societal intimidation. They were courageous enough to move against societal norms that were unacceptable to them. They were courageous when it mattered most, thus writing their names in the sands of time. Reading the series Women of Courage is a good place to learn about the significant role courage plays in achieving great things in life.
You can find the series Women of Courage at www.touchedbythelight.us.
Why are only a few women in history books? Why are women left out of leadership positions? Why are 21st century women struggling with the same issues that 20th century women fought against? The series Women of Courage gives answers to these questions. Millions of women all over the world are living in fear, unhappy, and unfulfilled, wishing they could do more with their lives. If you are one of these women, fearful and unhappy, take the bold step and purchase the series Women of Courage. Read and learn how other women met these challenges and succeed in living fulfilling lives. Read the series Women of Courage and learn how you can change your life forever. Women of Courage is an inspirational book that seeks to tell the stories of strong women who have persevered, even when those threatened by a woman's strength have stood in the way. It's a book for all women, a book to help more of us stand up and say, it's about time. It's a book for you. Get your copy from touchedbythelight.us.
Now, in 2017, there were 7 people found to be involved in sex trafficking in Iowa. In fact, they were considered to be a sex trafficking ring. They acted independent of one another, and they also acted jointly. In other words, the pimps shared information with one another with respect to the women they were trafficking. The pimps helped one another to advertise the girls that each one procured over the internet. The group came to the attention of people in Des Moines, Iowa, June 11, 2018, when it was announced that a federal grand jury had indicted several people, in fact 7 people, for sex trafficking. The grand jury had actually returned the indictment March the 28th, charging 7 defendants with sex trafficking. The case was investigated by the Des Moines Police Department, Vice and Narcotics Control Section. The Polk County Attorney's Office assisted the U.S. Attorney's Office with the prosecution. Several warrants were obtained. Arrests were made. Then there was the interrogation of Mr. Darren O. Coleman, Serena Ann Williams, of course, that was a female, Mark Philip Carter II, Ronzel Williams, Stephen Cobbs, and Brianna Lene Brown, and Julian Xavier Singleton, age 21. The 7 individuals were accused of operating this ring during the spring and summer of 2017. According to the indictments, the defendants trafficked 3 adult victims. Darren Coleman, Serena Williams, Mark Carter, and Stephen Cobbs were accused of conspiring with one another and engaging in sex trafficking of a victim by force, fraud, and coercion. These 7 appeared in court March 28, 2018. They were tried October 2nd, 2018. All 7 pleaded guilty. The only thing that can be said for these 7 people is that they all suffer from the same insanity. What they did was absolutely insane. None of these people had any money to get out on bail once they were arrested. They could not afford an attorney. So how much money were they amassing by prostituting women? The reason why I say that their behavior was insane is because every last one of these people pleaded guilty in court. The prosecution's evidence was overwhelming. Every last one of these people walked into court and pleaded guilty as charged. There was not a trial to speak of. The defense attorneys did not present any contrary testimony and make any plea to the jury. It was open and shut. Our clients are guilty. The only question now is, what is the court going to do to them? This is what the prosecutor said the 7 defendants did. Darren Coleman, age 29, recruited a victim in June 2017, and Serena Williams, age 26, advertised that victim's availability for prostitution online on an escort website and arranged for them to engage in sex acts with customers. Coleman admitted in the plea agreement that he threatened the victim, monitored her interactions with family and friends, and promised her money that she never received. Coleman's guilty plea involved several crimes against a second individual whom he enticed to prostitution, abused, and threatened after she got rid of firearms he had purchased, according to the news release. That victim was taken to various locations in Des Moines, Iowa, to engage in sex acts for money by Stephen Cobbs, the prosecutor said. Williams also admitted to facilitating the victim's involvement in prostitution. Remember, Williams is a female. Julian Xavier Singleton, age 21, admitted to using Facebook in June 2017 to promote prostitution by soliciting a victim to come to Des Moines, Iowa, and arrange for her to engage in sex acts for money that he kept. Ronzell Williams, age 26, and Brianna Brown, age 26, also entered guilty pleas to conspiracy to engage in sex trafficking involving the same victim. Mark Carter, age 26, recruited and enticed a minor to engage in commercial sex acts between May and July 2017, according to the news release. Prosecutor says he advertised the 16-year-old victim online on escort websites and took her to various locations to engage in sex acts. He also pleaded guilty to advertising two other victims, including the person victimized by Singleton, Ronzell Williams, and Brown online for prostitution. Now I want you to take a look at the possible sentences and ask yourself, were their efforts worth the time they will now spend in prison? Mr. Coleman and Mr. Cobbs are subject to a 15-year mandatory minimum sentence, maximum sentence of life in prison. Carter is subject to a 10-year mandatory minimum or life term for trafficking a minor. Serena Williams, Ronzell Williams, and Brown also pleaded to conspiracy to engage in sex trafficking, and they are subject to a maximum term in prison for life. Mr. Singleton is also subject up to 5 years in prison for using a facility of interstate commerce to promote prostitution. Each defendant is scheduled to be sentenced in January and or February 2019 before the United States District Court Chief Judge John Javery. The defendants were not charged with the Mann Act. Now let's continue to discuss the American sex trafficker. People who were born and raised in this country to believe in freedom, not slavery. But note how fast they adapted to the idea of sexual slavery. I am going to pause for a second to take a short break while you listen to information regarding willpower and encouragement. It is all a matter of learning new behaviors. And please remember, it is easier to build strong minds than to repair injured people. What I said is a modification of a quote by Frederick Douglass. He said, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." Now for my break. Dear listeners, help us save a life. Stop breast cancer from taking lives. Will you assist us in putting the booklet Black Women and Breast Cancer in the hands of a million people? Please go to the website www.touchedbythelight.us and download the booklet Black Women and Breast Cancer. Then email this booklet to 5 friends, asking them to email the booklet to 5 of their friends. We are trying to reach a million women with this information to save lives. The death of one woman to breast cancer from our community is one woman too many. We thank you for your support.
Oftentimes, fear is defined as fantasized experiences appearing real. We all fear something. It could be doing what's never been done, or being scared for no just cause. These fears hold us down and create a fantasized, albeit unreal, experience. If you must move ahead in life, you must stand up to your fear. If you must be successful, you must pull through the unreal experiences that fear has created in you. And trust me, you need a good dose of courage to do exactly that. With courage, there's no stopping you. How can you summon the courage to face your fears? As a woman, you're amazing and you have great capabilities. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. How then can you maximize these great capabilities? As you'll find out in the series, Women of Courage, the women we wrote about succeeded against all odds simply by standing up for themselves. Just like them, you can make your life count too.
You can find the series Women of Courage at www.touchedbythelight.us.
Every year, thousands of books are written on how to achieve our dreams, how to live a happier life, or make a lot of money. Yet, the number of people living unhappy lives keeps going up. People living a life of uncertainty, a life of despair. What could be the problem? Were the books lying about these promises, or were people not practicing what they read? You see, the truth is that most times we know exactly what we want out of life, and we often know how to get there. So, what is the missing link? It's the courage to take that first step, to go from where we are right now to the life of freedom and fulfillment we so much desire. We must first leave our comfort zone, and it takes courage to make that move. And that is exactly where all those books failed. They tell you what you should do, but can't get you to take that first step. A wise man once said, "Without courage, you can't leave your comfort zone. If you don't leave your comfort zone, you can't grow. If you can't grow, you can't be your best. And if you can't be your best, you can't be happy."
You can find the series Women of Courage at www.touchedbythelight.us.
If you have reached a point where you are stuck, having a sense of tiredness, coming from seeing all of your dreams and visions of success get obscured with the lack of experience, guidance, and knowledge necessary for success, learning from Women of Courage may be the most important thing you've read this year. Living a passionate life in a hectic and busy 21st century is getting increasingly harder. Women of Courage series will provide you with all the inspiration, courage, and role model you need to get inspired and take your life in your hands and start living as bravely, as passionate as you deserve.
You can find the series Women of Courage at www.touchedbythelight.us.
Why are only a few women in history books? Why are women left out of leadership positions? Why are 21st century women struggling with the same issues that 20th century women fought against? The series Women of Courage gives answers to these questions. Millions of women all over the world are living in fear, unhappy, and unfulfilled, wishing they could do more with their lives. If you are one of these women, fearful and unhappy, take the bold step and purchase the series Women of Courage. Read and learn how other women met these challenges and succeed in living fulfilling lives. Read the series Women of Courage and learn how you can change your life forever. Women of Courage is an inspirational book that seeks to tell the stories of strong women who have persevered, even when those threatened by a woman's strength have stood in the way. It's a book for all women, a book to help more of us stand up and say, "It's about time." It's a book for you. Get your copy from touchedbythelight.us.
We live in a society that has created an impression that a woman is limited in what she can do. The society lets you see yourself as a weaker human who should not aspire to greater things. Most of us grew up with that mentality and thus turned out to be unambitious. Good news is there are a lot of women out there, just like you, who have turned their lives around dramatically. Women like Mother Teresa, Lucy Burns, and Rosa Parks. There's one underlying factor common to all these women: courage. They were courageous in the face of societal intimidation. They were courageous enough to move against societal norms that were unacceptable to them. They were courageous when it mattered most, thus writing their standards in the sands of time. Purchase the Women of Courage series today at http://touchedbythelight.us or mail a check to P.O. Box 7267, Ann Arbor, Michigan 48107. Are you sick and tired of being you? Do you want another life, a second chance? Then it's time to change. It's time for you to find out who you are. It's time for you to stand up for yourself. It's time for you to think for yourself. It's time to rid your mind of poisonous beliefs like women should only be seen and not heard. It's time for you to learn how other women accomplished their goals. For more information regarding Women of Courage and to be among the countless women learning to manage the challenges, limitations, and rejections of life, go to https://touchedbythelight.us.
We live in a society that has created an impression that a woman is limited in what she can do. The society lets you see yourself as a weaker human who should not aspire to greater things. Most of us grew up with that mentality and thus turned out to be unambitious. Good news is there are lots of women out there just like you who have turned their lives around dramatically. There's one underlying factor common to all these women: courage. They were courageous in the face of societal intimidation. They were courageous enough to move against societal norms that were unacceptable to them. They were courageous when it mattered most, thus writing their names in the sands of time. Reading the series Women of Courage is a good place to learn about the significant role courage plays in achieving great things in life.
You can find the series Women of Courage at www.touchedbythelight.us.
You should read Women of Courage. The book will inspire you to begin your life again. Read how females took courage to live exemplary lives, even though most were from humble backgrounds. The books teach the importance of courage in achieving the great things of life. The books motivate you to look beyond those things you think you couldn't do. The books give you the insight into your innate abilities that your fears have suppressed. There is no greater feeling than creating a new you.
You can find the series Women of Courage at www.touchedbythelight.us. Here is some information regarding the legal side of sex trafficking. This legal description better describes the acts and how devastating sex trafficking is to women and men forced to labor for the financial benefit of someone else. These legal descriptions also note the cruelty of both the trafficker and their buyers. Most buyers have no remorse. They feel since they are paying for the service, it is like any other financial transaction. In 2003, the state of Washington became the first state to criminalize human trafficking. Since then, every state has enacted laws establishing criminal penalties for trafficking, seeking to profit from forced labor, or sexual servitude. The laws vary in several ways, including who is defined as a trafficker, the statutory elements required to prove guilt in order to obtain a conviction, and the seriousness of the criminal and financial penalties those convicted will face. Down to as where sex trafficking can occur or the common potential sex trafficking venues. These are hostess or strip club based parlors, residential brothels, street based online advertisement, commercial or fronted brothels. Now, the common potential labor trafficking venues are domestic work, traveling sales crews, restaurant food services, agriculture, commercial frontal brothels, health and beauty services. Now, the travel sales crews are the most abusive. People are enticed to believe that they will be given proper food and housing for their going out to try to sell magazines. Once these people leave their home state, they're vulnerable because then they don't get paid, they're not given adequate food or housing. The enticement is just a big lie to get people to trust them. Now, defining trafficking actions. State laws include a wide variety of activities under their definition of trafficking. Differences in trafficking definitions are critical to identifying who has criminal culpability. Most commonly, trafficking activities are defined as recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons for the purpose of exploitation. Jurisdictions have expanded their definition of trafficking by including activities like purchasing and benefiting or profiting from sex trafficking. Now, the statutory enumerated trafficking activities include selling, recruiting, harboring, transporting, isolating, enticing, providing, receiving, holding, confining, harboring, purchasing, profiting, soliciting, and depriving of liberty. Now, Alaska identifies anyone who benefits from trafficking in any way as being guilty of human trafficking in the second degree. Direct involvement is first degree trafficking. Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi allow, under certain circumstances, businesses and corporations to be prosecuted for trafficking. Vermont, trafficking is defined includes benefiting financially from participating in a venue where a person is compelled to engage in commercial sex. What these states have done have said any activities associated with the trafficking of a person, you are guilty of something. Now, means of trafficking. In order to obtain a trafficking conviction, state laws in most instances require that the prosecutor prove traffickers compel their victims into labor or sexual servitude. The majority of laws include the element of force, fraud, coercion, but their definitions can vary greatly from state to state. For example, in some states, their definition focuses primarily on the use of physical force. Other states more broadly include psychological control, financial threats, legal harassment, and drug addiction. Statutory definitions, forms of force, fraud, or coercion includes threatening legal action, withholding or destroying passport, using or threatening force, debt bondage, using controlled substance, causing financial harm, physical restraint, blackmail or extortion, kidnapping or abduction, abusing a position of power. California's trafficking statutes applies to action that would deprive someone of their liberty, including coercion, violence, menacing, and duress. Oklahoma's definition of coercion includes destroying, concealing, removing, confiscating, or possessing any actual or purported passport, labor or immigration documents, or other governmental identification documents, including a driver's license or birth certificate. Trafficking actions in Wisconsin statutes include debt bondage, extortion, fraud, and deception. Now, this area of the law is extremely important. It's called penalty enhancements. State trafficking laws address many factors and circumstances that can enhance the criminal penalty for trafficking crimes. This means that a trafficker can do something to an individual that makes the prosecutor feel he should receive a penalty greater than what the law states. Laws, for example, can assign more severe or additional penalties for trafficking when the crimes are committed against a vulnerable population like children, undocumented immigrants, and people with a mental illness, or are effectuated through aggravating circumstances like the use of violence, branding, or drug addiction. So, if you brand someone or you take a child and force this child to commit abusive acts, this means that once you are arrested and tried, the prosecutor wants to enhance the penalty against you. Now, the law describes vulnerable groups. Now, Delaware raises labor trafficking from a Class C to a Class B felony when committed against a minor. Florida raises the trafficking penalty for commercial sexual activity from a first-degree felony to a life felony when the crime is committed against a person who is mentally defective or mentally incapacitated. Missouri law creates the crime of contributing to human trafficking for those who misuse immigrant documentation to facilitate trafficking crimes. The law defines aggravating circumstances as Nevada raises labor trafficking from a Class 3 to a Class 2A felony when coerced by inflicting or threatening to inflict serious bodily injury. New York raises labor trafficking from a Class D to a Class C felony when compelled by controlled substances to impair a person's judgment. Utah raises the penalty for human trafficking from a second-degree felony to a first-degree felony when it results in the death or serious harm, involves rape or sodomy, involves 10 or more victims, or involves a victim who is held against their will for longer than 30 days. This is why that soldier in North Carolina is facing 90 years. Now, for businesses that are involved in trafficking, their penalties are, in some states, they've enacted measures that specifically address penalties that apply to business entities if it has committed or has been using in committing a human trafficking crime. Laws also create procedures for the dissolution of a business entity as well as establish additional fines. So the law can actually dismantle a business if they have been trafficking and using people to labor and not paying them. Now, here are some of the criminal penalties and fines. Alabama law makes business entities criminally liable for human trafficking if an agent, by act or omission, performs an element of the crime while acting within the scope of his or her duty, and the crime was authorized, requested, commanded, performed in a way that the entity knew or should have known was occurring. Massachusetts enables a business entity that commits trafficking of persons for forced labor to be fined up to $100,000. The state also holds any business that knowingly aids or is jointly involved in labor trafficking civilly liable. So in this instance, you pay a penalty and then you also have to go to prison for criminal charges. South Carolina laws require an additional penalty of up to 10 years in prison if a business owner uses his or her business to facilitate sex or labor trafficking crimes. Now, with respect to dissolving a business, Hawaii requires, upon conviction for labor trafficking, that the court revokes any business license issued by the state to the enterprise that the convicted person used to facilitate the offense. For businesses found guilty of trafficking, Minnesota laws enable, in addition to criminal penalties, a court to dissolve or reorganize an entity, suspend or revoke any license or permit granted by a state agency, or order the surrender of its charter or its certification to conduct business in the state. In Vermont, if any business is found guilty of human trafficking, the Attorney General is empowered to commence a proceeding in the civil division of the Superior Court to dissolve that business. When you look at these penalties, don't you wonder why people would go out and try to traffic people for labor? It's stupid. You're taking a great chance. Now, this section discusses how the law addresses the demand for commercial sex, how the law addresses the buyer. State laws vary on the criminal penalty they assess on people who purchase sex. Some states punish sex purchasers the same as traffickers, generally with a felony level crime, while others punish them with misdemeanors associated with paying for prostitution or solicitation. A third option some states have taken is to assign a middle ground crime, usually being either a more severe version of solicitation or a less severe form of human trafficking. Now, South Dakota laws assess a class 1 misdemeanor for hiring a person for sexual activity, unless the person should have known they were hiring someone forced to engage in this activity through trafficking. Then it is a class 6 felony. Washington identifies anyone who purchased a sexually explicit act as human trafficking guilty of a class A felony. Now, statistics on estimating how prolific trafficking crimes are in the United States is challenging. Currently, there is an uneven data, particularly across the state and local jurisdictions, concerning the extent to which the state laws criminalizing trafficking have acted as an effective deterrent or being utilized in prosecutions. The efforts the state and the federal government have made to track trafficking investigations and prosecution data are provided in some reports. Thank you for listening to Women of Courage and have a great day.